running back half PPR rankings video. But when we look at the potential of this offensive line, I have them ranked 6th based on the information and statistics and metrics I've gathered this offseason. Of course, last year in 2025, they ranked 11th in running back success percentage, 42.6%. They were number 4 in terms of adjusted line yards. They ranked 12th in yards before contact per attempt, 2.43. Again, having your running back at 2.43 yards before contact, on top of the fact that a guy like Javonte Williams last season was averaging 3.56 yards after contact, of course, gives him a huge advantage. But beyond that, in terms of stuffed percentage, this was the 4th best team in the category. Only 12.5% of their runs were at the line of scrimmage or behind, which is an incredible percentage. And of course, speaks to just how incredible this offensive line was last year and how much better they're going to be this upcoming year, because they have 100% offensive line continuity going into this upcoming season. All 5 starters are returning. And the positive note on that is that they're not going to be as injured as they were last year. Beebe missed 6 games, Booker missed 2 games, and Guyton missed 7 games. Smith and Steele both played the entirety of the season and did in fact have their own injuries, but did not miss time. Now, going into this upcoming year, obviously the offensive play calling is going to be a big determining factor as to how much workload that Javonte Williams and, of course, this offensive line will have. Shoddy, over the course of the last couple seasons as the offensive coordinator, has often ran a scheme that is a gap and zone blend. Now, when we talk about the potential of this offensive line, when we look at their PFF run blocking grades, they ranked 7th in terms of zone blocking and 11th in terms of gap blocking, which again keeps them within that elite tier. Now, speaking of Brian Schottenheimer's overall play calling and utilizing running backs, his history of success with fantasy running backs looks like 2018 to 2020, Chris Carson ranked as RB 15, 11, and 17 overall while playing 14, 15, and 12 games in those given seasons. And then additionally, over the course of the last 3 years with the Dallas Cowboys, their starting RB finishes RB 15, 22, and 11 in the most recent 3 years. So of course, we know that there is going to be a top 15 running back associated with the Cowboys this season, and that's going to be in the form of Javonte Williams, who last year, prior to injury from weeks 1 through 16, averaged 14.26 fantasy points per game on 19.2 opportunities per game. On a 17-game healthy pace, he was looking to potentially be the number 10 overall running back in fantasy football while averaging the 12th highest fantasy points per game amongst all running backs. And speaking of amongst all running backs, he was one of the most efficient last year. Among the 55 running backs who had a minimum of 75 rushing attempts last year, he ranked 11th in yards per carry, 5th in yards after contact per attempt, 7th in missed tackles forced per attempt, and was number 23 of the group in rushing attempts that led to 10 or more yards. Again, the breakaway runs still had us desiring more, but there is still potential for expanding upon that this year as he inked a 3-year, $24 million contract this offseason. We're talking about a workhorse opportunity in this backfield within an elite offense and feasibly no competition. Yes, we've heard some murmurs regarding Jaden Blue this offseason, and I thought Jaden Blue would be the guy last year. It's not going to be. The reality of the situation is Javonte Williams is clearing away the RB1 of this team, currently sitting at an ADP on ESPN of 38, on Sleeper 35.7, and Yahoo 35.0. These ADPs have shrunk in the last couple days. Obviously, people are becoming a little bit more aware as to the opportunity that Javonte Williams will be exposed to this offseason, but if you can get him as a 4th round selection, it's one of the easiest picks you can make in 2026. All right, let's move on to another running back who is getting himself a huge upgrade within his offensive line play. Now, this upcoming year, I have them ranked as the 10th best run blocking offensive line, but in 2025, there wasn't much success because of all the injuries and, of course, lack of production from the big boys up front. They ranked 18th in success percentage, 27th in adjusted line yards, 26th in yards before contact per attempt, and 27th in stuffed percentage. 20% of the rushes from this offense led to being stuffed at the line of scrimmage or behind it, which, of course, did not bode well for guys like Omarion Hampton. But going into this upcoming season, I'm anticipating a lot of upside because technically speaking, there's only one starter from this offensive line returning from last year, and that's Joe Alt. Otherwise, guys like Rashawn Slater, who were out the entirety of the season, and additionally, the interior of this offensive line, guard, center, guard, have been entirely replaced with guys like Biotish, Strange, and Slaughter. Therefore, with a pretty much new offensive line in 2026. What can we anticipate? Well, I'm assuming a lot better run blocking play, especially when you have an offensive coordinator like Mike McDaniel, who is the former Miami Dolphins head coach from 2022 to 2025. He is a disciple of Kyle Shanahan and a former run game coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers prior to getting the job in Miami, which even after losing the Miami Dolphins job, immediately landed a job in Los Angeles just because they know how incredible of a play caller he has been over the course of his career. Now, speaking of play calling, from 2024 to 2025, 60% of Devon Achane's rushing attempts were zone scheme runs. When we take into account the 2026 Los Angeles Chargers starting offensive line, ranked 6th amongst all offensive lines in zone blocking grades via PFF, they built an offensive line that is specifically elite at executing zone blocking schemes. Anticipate a lot of success for Omarion Hampton, especially when we take into account the Miami Dolphins last season were bottom 6 in success percentage and yards before contact per attempt and bottom 2 in stuff percentage. Despite all that, Devon Achane ran for 1,350 rushing yards on 5.67 yards per carry. So imagine what the Chargers run game is going to look like this year. On top of the fact that besides having an incredibly upgraded offensive line, you bring in Charlie Kolar, who ranked 10th amongst all tight ends in run blocking last season. And when we take into account what Omarion Hampton was able to do last year behind a mediocre offensive line, in games in which he played 65% of the snaps, 17.5 fantasy points per game. Amongst 55 running backs last season with 75 touches minimum, averaged 4.4 yards per carry, 3.35 yards after contact per attempt, which ranked 11th, which is great. He was number 3 in missed tackles forced per attempt and 14 in terms of the rate of rushes that led to 10 or more yards. In my opinion, Omarion Hampton is one of the easiest second-round selections that you can make in 2026. And if in fact he falls to the back end of that second round, for those of you who make a top 4 selection of Bijan, Gibbs, Chase, or Puka, pairing it up with Omarion Hampton is an incredibly advantageous position to be in. Now, speaking of the success I anticipate to see from Omarion Hampton and Javonte Williams, the first 2 running backs of today's video, I wanted to go ahead and head on over to Parlay Play to talk about their current rushing yards going into this upcoming season. Currently sits at 925 for Omarion Hampton and 950 for Javonte Williams, based on the fact that both of these running backs were averaging over 4 yards per carry and are anticipating to see upwards of 250 rushing attempts this upcoming season. Under the assumption they stay healthy, they should very easily be able to surpass these numbers behind these incredible offensive lines. Yes, one team has 100% continuity, the other one nearly replacing the entirety of their offensive line. But because of their scheme, the tendencies of this offense to continue to run the football at the rate at which they do, and the fact that both these offenses have a very high chance of being top 10 in the league, I think this is a fantastic play to make. Again, for those of you guys who are trying to tail my picks this season, be sure to go ahead, head on over to the feed via Parlay Play, look up A. Kirchhoff. Of course, A, the first initial of my first name and the entirety of my last name, and you can go ahead and tail the plays that I put together over the course of this season. All right, with that all mentioned, let's go ahead and let's move on to the next running back I wanted to mention. That's Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I understand many of us made an investment early last season that burnt us with Bucky Irving, and even though his offensive line did not play well last year, a lot of it was due to the injuries they sustained. The primary 4 starters, Wirfs, Bredesen, Mock, and Gudecki, all missed significant time. So when we look at the 2026 rank of 14 in comparison to where they found success last season, in terms of success percentage, 14, adjusted line yards, 28, yards before contact per attempt, 18th, and stuff percentage, 21. Yes, you may be thinking, well, Andrew, where is the improvement coming from? Well, it's 100% O-line continuity. You're bringing back all 5 starters. Hopefully, half of the starting offensive line won't be out by midseason. If they're healthy, expect for Bucky Irving to find success, and I'll tell you why. Because besides the offensive line being incredible at run blocking, Durham, their primary blocking tight end, had the second highest grade amongst all tight ends last season with a minimum of 100 run blocks. So when we take that into account, we have the talent up front, we have the talent in the backfield, and now we get a new offensive coordinator in Zach Robinson, who, as the OC of the Atlanta Falcons last season, called outside zone runs on 68.4% of his plays, while last season Josh Grizzard, the offensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, ran a very heavy gap infused scheme. Overall, we're going to get a little bit of a more dynamic offense now that we go back to what Liam Cohen was able to produce with this offense in 2024. Already this offseason, Zach Robinson, who is also a disciple of McVay, as was Liam Cohen, these offenses are kind of similar, and he's already said that he's utilizing half of the playbook that, of course, Liam Cohen's Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2024 utilized. And why that's so important is because Bucky Irving thrived in that scheme. He was averaging 5.65 yards per carry on outside zone rushing attempts, which we're hoping to get Bucky Irving back to his 2024 state, where, of course, he was one of the most elite running backs in terms of efficiency that year, averaging 5.4 yards per carry, 4.03 yards after contact per attempt. Additionally, from week 6 through 18, while he became the starter of that offense, was averaging 16.5